Barrett stood in the center of the mahogany courtroom, adjusting his silk tie like he was preparing for a magazine cover shoot rather than his own financial execution. He winked at me. He actually winked. He thought the judge was about to hand him the keys to his empire. He had no idea that the manila envelope resting under my trembling hands did not just contain divorce papers. It contained a federal prison sentence. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I still recall the exact temperature of that courtroom. It was 68 degrees, cold enough that I had to keep my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. The shaking wasn't from fear, though. Barrett probably looked at my stillness and assumed I was terrified, beaten down by the sheer weight of his legal team and his charisma. But I was shaking because I had been holding my breath for 18 months, and the oxygen was finally about to rush back into my lungs. The room smelled of old wood polish and floor wax, a sterile scent that tried to mask the misery that usually happened within these walls. Barrett sat 3 tables away from me. He was flanked by his attorney, a man named Warren who wore a suit that I knew for a fact cost more than my first car. And right behind Barrett, in the front row of the gallery, sat Ashlyn. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that looked modest to the untrained eye, but I knew better. I knew it cost $4,200 because I had seen the charge on the corporate credit card last month, labeled under office supplies. Her legs were crossed at the ankle, and she had a small, polite smile plastered on her face, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse right before the final pounce. She thought she had already won everything. Barrett looked good. I have to admit that, even now, he had always known how to present himself as the golden boy. He wore a charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and his hair was styled with that effortless precision that actually takes 20 minutes in front of a mirror. He sat with his shoulders back and his chin up, radiating the confidence of a man who believes the world is just a stage built for his monologue. For the past 2 hours, I had watched him testify about our marriage. With every sentence he spoke, he rewrote our history, erasing me from the narrative until I was nothing more than a ghost in his biography. Mrs. Hollingsworth contributed to the household, he said, his voice smooth and projecting to the back of the room. She was a wonderful homemaker, but the business success that was built through my own hard work, my own vision, my own risk-taking. I started with nothing and built an empire, he continued. Nothing. He actually said he started with nothing. I kept my face perfectly neutral when he said that word, forcing my muscles to remain slack. Inside, I wanted to laugh, or maybe I wanted to scream until my throat bled. I wasn't sure which one would come out if I opened my mouth. Warren had presented their case like a Broadway performance. He had documents showing every property, every business asset, every bank account, all in Barrett's name, all belonging to Hollingsworth Development. He had made it sound so simple. Barrett built a company. Colette stayed home. Barrett succeeded. Now Barrett keeps what is his. Your Honor, Warren said, adjusting his rimless glasses and looking solemn. Mr. Hollingsworth is prepared to offer reasonable spousal support for a transitional period, but the business assets, the properties, the company itself, these were built solely through Mr. Hollingsworth's efforts and belong to him alone. Judge Chen listened to all of it without much expression. She was a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. I had researched her before the hearing. She had spent 25 years on the family court bench. She had seen every liar, every cheat, and every narcissist the city had to offer. I was counting on that experience. I needed her to see what was beneath the polish. Now we were in the final stretch, the discussion regarding the division of assets. Warren stood up again, holding a thick folder. Your Honor, if I may address the division of assets, he began. Actually, Barrett interrupted, standing up himself. Warren touched his arm quickly, a subtle signal to sit down and shut up, but Barrett shook him off. I would like to say something. Judge Chen raised one eyebrow. Mr. Hollingsworth, you have already given your testimony. I know, Your Honor, but I think it needs to be said clearly." Barrett turned and looked directly at me for the first time all day. His eyes were hard and cold, devoid of any of the warmth he used to fake so well. This was the Barrett I had come to know over the past few years. Not the man I married, but the monster he had fed until it consumed him. Colette has been trying to claim that she deserves half of everything I built, but the truth is simple, he said, his voice dropping an octave for effect. He paused, and I could see him savoring the moment, rolling the taste of his victory around in his mouth. "You will never touch my money again," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Someone in the gallery gasped softly. I did not move. I did not blink. I just kept my hands folded in my lap, feeling the sharp edge of the envelope against my fingertips. Then Ashlyn leaned forward from her seat behind him. I heard her voice, sugar sweet and poisonous, cut through the silence. "That is right, honey." She actually called him honey in open court during his divorce hearing. The sheer audacity of it, the confidence it took to do that, was almost impressive. Barrett smiled, that same self-satisfied smirk he had been wearing all day. Warren looked uncomfortable, shuffling his papers, but he did not contradict his client. Why would he? Barrett was paying him a fortune to win this case, and in their minds, they had already won. Judge Chen looked at me. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, do you have a response?" I could feel everyone watching me. The court reporter, the bailiff, Ashlyn, Barrett. They probably expected me to cry. They expected the fragile housewife to break down, to beg, or to scream. The old Colette might have done that, but I wasn't her anymore. "No, Your Honor," I said quietly. "I will let my evidence speak for me." My mind drifted back to the beginning. It is strange how you can pinpoint the exact moment your life went off the rails, even if you didn't see the train coming at the time. The first time I met Barrett Hollingsworth, I was 23 years old and he spilled a venti hazelnut latte all over my presentation binder. It was at a networking event for small business owners and professionals downtown. I had been working at Fisher & Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm, for 2 years. My boss had sent me there to scout for potential clients, to hand out business cards and look professional. I had prepared this entire packet about our services, spent hours formatting the margins and checking the spelling. I was proud of it. I was young, hungry, and desperate to prove that I was more than just a junior associate. Then this guy in paint-splattered jeans backed into me while gesturing wildly about some property deal he was describing to no one in particular. Boom. Hot coffee everywhere. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," he said, grabbing napkins from the buffet table and making it worse by smearing the brown liquid across the title page. "I am such an idiot." I wasn't looking where I was going. "Here, let me help." "It is okay," I said, trying to salvage what I could. Most of the pages were ruined, soaked through and turning translucent. "It is not okay," he insisted. "I just destroyed your... What is this?" He picked up one of the drying pages, squinting at the text. "Investment Analysis Services." "Are you an accountant?" "I work for one," I said, wiping coffee off my blazer. His whole face lit up. It was like someone had flipped a switch behind his eyes. "Really?" "Because I actually really need to talk to an accountant. Like, desperately. I am trying to start a real estate development business, and I have no idea what I am doing with the financial side." That was Barrett at 27. He was enthusiastic, a little clumsy, full of big dreams, and absolutely terrible at managing money. He was charming in a rough, unpolished way. He didn't have the suits or the silk ties back then. He had calloused hands and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room who understood him. We talked for 2 hours that night. He bought me dinner at a diner down the street to make up for the binder. Somewhere between the appetizers and the dessert, I forgot this was supposed to be a business meeting. He didn't pretend to know things he didn't. He was refreshingly honest about his ignorance. When I explained tax structures for limited liability companies, he listened like I was teaching him the secrets of the universe. He leaned in, his eyes wide. He asked questions. He took notes on the back of a paper placemat. "You are really smart," he said at one point, looking at me like he was seeing something valuable. "I am just doing my job," I deflected, feeling a blush rise up my neck. "No, I mean it," he said, intense and serious. "The way you explained all that, you made it make sense. Most people talk down to me because I am just a contractor. They see the paint on my pants and assume I am stupid. You didn't do that. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. Looking back, maybe that was fast, but it felt right at the time. I thought I had found someone who appreciated my brain, someone who needed me as much as I wanted to be needed. I didn't realize that need is a vacuum, and eventually it sucks everything out of you." Barrett was working as a general contractor doing kitchen renovations and bathroom upgrades for other people. But his real dream was to flip houses himself. He wanted to be the developer, not just the hired hand. He had the skills. He could do electrical, plumbing, carpentry, all of it. What he didn't have was capital. "I found this property," he told me one night over dinner at my apartment. We were eating takeout Chinese food on my beige couch. "It is perfect, Colette. A foreclosure in the North District. It needs work, sure, but nothing I can't handle." He pulled out a crumpled listing sheet from his pocket. "It would sell for $300,000 easy once it is fixed up," he said. "But the bank wants $65,000 cash, and I have—" He paused, looking down at his noodles, looking embarrassed. "I have about $8,000 saved." I set down my chopsticks. I started doing the math in my head automatically. It was a reflex. "How much would the renovation cost?" I asked. "I can do most of the labor myself," he said quickly. "Materials, permits, maybe $20,000, $25,000 to be safe. So you need about $90,000 total," I said. "Yeah." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Might as well be $9 million. No bank is going to give me that kind of loan with no collateral and no track record. I am stuck." I didn't say anything right away. I sat there, looking at him, looking at the defeat in his shoulders. I had $53,000 in my retirement account. I had been building it since I started working at 19, putting away every spare dollar, living frugally, skipping vacations. My parents had taught me to always have savings, always plan ahead. Security was the most important thing. But looking at Barrett, I saw something else. I saw a future where we built something together. I saw a chance to be part of something bigger than just analyzing other people's wealth. "What if I helped?" I heard myself say. Barrett looked up at me. "What?" "I have money saved," I said. "Not all of it, but most of what you would need for the down payment. If you are serious about this, Colette—" "No, I can't take your savings." "You wouldn't be taking it," I said, my voice getting stronger. "It would be an investment in our future." Our future. I said it so easily. We got married 3 months later at the courthouse. Just us and 2 witnesses we pulled in from the hallway. Nothing fancy. We were saving money for the business. I wore a white sundress I already owned. Barrett wore the one good suit he had, which was ill-fitting at the shoulders. 2 weeks after the wedding, I withdrew $47,000 from my retirement account. The penalties for early withdrawal hurt physically. It felt like I was bleeding money. But Barrett was right about the property. We bought it. He renovated it himself over 4 months, working 18-hour days. I would come over after my job and sweep sawdust, paint walls, and bring him sandwiches. We sold it for $285,000. After expenses, we cleared $90,000 in profit. "We did it," Barrett said the day the sale closed. He picked me up and spun me around in our tiny apartment kitchen, laughing. "We actually did it, Colette. We." I loved that he said we. I loved that I was part of the victory. I didn't know then that "we" was a temporary pronoun in Barrett's vocabulary. The second flip went even better than the first, then the third. By year 2, Barrett had quit contracting for other people entirely. By year 3, we had a crew of 4 guys. By year 5, we had an office. I ran everything behind the scenes. I kept my job at the accounting firm for the first 2 years to keep our health insurance. But I worked a second shift every night for our company. I registered Hollingsworth Development LLC with the state. I set up the accounting systems on QuickBooks. I negotiated with suppliers when Barrett was out looking at properties. I managed the permits, the inspections, the endless bureaucracy that comes with real estate development. Barrett hated paperwork. He said it gave him a headache. So I did it. I learned the zoning laws better than the city planners. I found loopholes in the tax code that saved us thousands of dollars. When the city threatened to shut down our fourth project because of a drainage issue, I was the one who went down to the municipal building. I sat in a waiting room for 6 hours until the senior engineer agreed to see me. I walked him through our updated plans, showed him the hydrological report I had commissioned, and convinced him to sign off. Barrett was the face. He was the one who shook hands and charmed investors, but I was the spine. Without me, the whole thing would have collapsed into a pile of unfiled receipts and code violations. For a long time, that dynamic worked. We were partners. He respected me. He would come home and tell me about the problems on the site, and we would solve them together over dinner. But somewhere around year 7, things started changing. The success started to get to his head, or maybe the success just revealed who he always was. It was subtle at first. Barrett started going to business events without me. "You should stay home and relax," he would say, kissing me on the forehead. "You worked all day. You look tired. I'm just going to shake some hands. It will be boring." Then, when we were out with his new business associates, men in expensive suits who drank scotch and talked about golf, he introduced me differently. Not, "This is Colette, my partner," but "This is my wife, Colette." Just his wife. The emphasis was always on the possessive. I remember one gala in particular. It was for the Chamber of Commerce. Barrett had just been named Developer of the Year. I was wearing a black gown, feeling elegant, standing by his side as people came up to congratulate him. "Barrett, this is incredible work," one man said, clapping him on the back. "How did you manage the zoning on the Riverside project? Everyone said that land was untouchable." I froze. I waited for him to say, "Actually, Colette handled that. She found the variance in the code." Instead, Barrett laughed, a deep booming sound. "Well, you know me," he said, grinning. "I don't take no for an answer. I just had to have the vision to see past the red tape. I knew if I pushed hard enough, the city would fold." He didn't mention me. He didn't even look at me. He absorbed the praise like a sponge, soaking it up until he was swollen with it. Later, in the car ride home, I brought it up. "You know I was the one who got the zoning approved, right?" I asked quietly. Barrett sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "Of course, babe, I know that. But these guys, they don't want to hear about paperwork. They want the story. They want the magic. I have to sell the brand. And the brand is me. The brand is me." That was the first time he said it out loud. It felt like a slap. By year 10, the erasure was nearly complete. Barrett had hired a professional accounting firm to handle the books. "No offense, babe," he said when he told me over breakfast. He didn't even look up from his phone. "But we are getting big enough that we need a real chief financial officer." I stared at him over my coffee. "I have an accounting degree," I reminded him. "I have been doing the books for a decade. I know where every penny is. I know, he said, waving his hand dismissively. "But you never got your CPA license, did you? And these guys, they have experience with companies our size, international tax law, mergers, complex stuff." "I can learn it," I said. "I learned everything else." Barrett finally looked up. His eyes were soft, filled with that toxic benevolence that I came to hate more than his anger. "Colette, listen to yourself. You are stressing out just talking about it. You are so fragile lately." "Fragile?" I repeated. "Yeah, you are always tired. You are always worrying. I am doing this for you. Now you can finally just relax, enjoy life, go to the spa, lunch with your friends. You have earned it, like I had finished a shift. Like I was an employee he was putting out to pasture. I should have fought harder. I should have screamed. I should have marched into the office and fired the new firm. But Barrett was so confident, so sure of himself, and part of me, the part that had been worn down by years of small comments and dismissals, believed him. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was out of my depth. Maybe I should just be a good wife and enjoy the money we had made. So I stepped back. I let go of the reins. I stopped logging into the bank accounts. I stopped checking the permit filings. I let him take over everything. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Because while I was relaxing, while I was trying to be the wife he wanted, Barrett was busy building a new life, one that didn't include me. The text message that detonated my life arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I was not snooping. That is the lie I told myself for weeks afterward, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. I told myself I was just cleaning the kitchen counter, just wiping down the granite around the charging station. But the truth is, a part of me was always waiting. When you live with a man who has slowly erased you, you become hyper-vigilant, scanning the environment for clues like a prey animal testing the wind. Barrett had left his phone face up next to the fruit bowl while he showered. He never did that. He usually guarded that device like it contained the nuclear launch codes. But he had been rushing, distracted by a conference call that had run late. The screen lit up. It vibrated against the hard stone, a short, sharp buzz that sounded like an angry insect. I glanced at it. It was a reflex. I saw the name at the top of the notification bubble first. It was saved simply as A. Sinclair. That sounded professional. It sounded like an architect or a supplier. But the message below the name was not professional. I read the words clearly before the screen went black again. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Wear that black lace thing I bought you." My hands went numb. It wasn't a tingling sensation. It was an immediate, total loss of feeling, as if the blood had simply drained out of my extremities to pool in my stomach. I stood there holding a damp dish towel, staring at the black rectangle of glass. My brain tried to reject it. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe A. Sinclair was a prankster. But I knew. Deep down in the pit of my gut, beneath the layers of denial and the years of gaslighting, I knew exactly who A. Sinclair was. I thought about the late nights at the office. I thought about the sudden business trips to the coast. I thought about the way Barrett had stopped touching me, citing stress, citing exhaustion, citing my fragility. He wasn't tired. He was just spending his energy somewhere else. I carefully set down the towel. I had to be precise. If I dropped it, if I made a noise, the reality would become real. I walked to our bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking slightly under my weight. I looked at the duvet cover I had spent 3 hours choosing, trying to find the perfect shade of slate gray to please Barrett. I didn't cry. That is the strange part. I expected to shatter. I expected to weep and wail like a woman in a soap opera. But instead, I felt a cold, hard clarity settling over me. It was like a fog lifting to reveal a landscape of wreckage. Barrett came out of the shower 20 minutes later. I could hear him humming. He was singing a song by a band he claimed to hate, something upbeat and poppy. He walked into the bedroom with a towel wrapped around his waist, water droplets clinging to his chest. He kissed the top of my head as he passed me to get to the closet. "I have a late meeting tonight, babe," he said effortlessly. "Don't wait up. It is the zoning commission. You know how they drag things out." "Okay," I said. My voice sounded normal. That terrified me. How could I sound so normal when my world had just ended? He didn't even look at me closely enough to see that something had broken behind my eyes. He was too busy choosing a tie. He picked the blue silk one, the one he wore when he wanted to impress investors, or apparently mistresses. That night, after Barrett left for his alleged zoning meeting, I did something I had never done before. I grabbed my keys, put on a baseball cap, and I followed him. I felt ridiculous. I felt like a stalker in my own life. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel of my sedan. I stayed 3 cars back, my heart hammering so hard I could feel the pulse in my throat. Every time he braked, I panicked. Sure, he had seen me. But Barrett wasn't looking in his rearview mirror. He was looking forward toward whatever future he thought he was building without me. He didn't drive to the city hall where the zoning commission met. He drove to the Pearl District, the expensive part of downtown where the old warehouses had been converted into lofts that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. He pulled his black Range Rover into a reserved spot in front of a new high-rise called the Meridian. I parked a block away, squeezing my car into a loading zone and praying I wouldn't get towed. I turned off the engine and watched. Barrett walked into the lobby like he owned the place. He probably did own a unit there, or maybe the company did. I waited 30 minutes. I counted the seconds. 1001, 1002. I needed to be sure he was settled. I needed to be sure he wasn't coming right back out. At 8:30, I walked into the lobby. It smelled of expensive perfume and fresh lilies. The doorman was a young guy, barely 20, looking bored behind a marble desk. "I am here to see the Sinclair residence," I said. I forced my voice to be steady. I channeled the old Colette, the one who stared down city engineers and tax auditors. The doorman barely glanced at me. He checked a list. 1204, he muttered. "Elevators are to your right, 12th floor, apartment 4. I didn't go up. I didn't need to. If I went up there, I would pound on the door. I would scream. I would give Barrett the satisfaction of calling me crazy. I would give him the ammunition to tell everyone I was unstable. I walked back to my car. I sat there for 2 hours staring at the lit window on the 12th floor. I watched the silhouette of a man pace back and forth. Then I saw a second shadow join him. They merged into one shape. I started the car. My hands were shaking so badly I had to use both of them to turn the key. I drove home in silence. When Barrett came back at 1 in the morning, smelling of expensive bourbon and someone else's vanilla lotion, I pretended to be asleep. I lay there, rigid, listening to his breathing, and I began to plan. The next morning, as soon as Barrett left for the office, I opened my laptop. I needed to know how bad it was. I needed to see the numbers. I navigated to the bank's website. I typed in my username. I typed in the password we had used for 15 years. It was the name of our first dog, followed by the year we were married. The screen flickered. A red box appeared. Password incorrect. I stared at it. Maybe I had typed it wrong. My fingers were trembling. I tried again, slowly, deliberately. Password incorrect. I tried the backup password, the one we used for the utility bills. Access denied. I sat back in my chair, the cold plastic digging into my spine. He had changed them. He hadn't just changed them yesterday. I checked the forgot password link. The recovery email had been changed to an address I didn't recognize, a secure, encrypted domain. This wasn't a sudden decision. You don't lock your wife out of 15 years of joint finances overnight unless you have been planning it for months. I tried to log into the cloud storage where we kept the business records. Denied. I tried the credit card portal. Denied. He had walled me off. I was standing outside a fortress I had helped build, and the drawbridge was pulled up tight. Panic started to rise in my chest, a hot, suffocating wave. I had $42 in my wallet. I had a debit card linked to a household account that he probably watched like a hawk. He knew. He must have known I would look eventually. He had prepared for this. He had made sure that when I finally woke up, I would be powerless. I thought about the fragile comment. You are so fragile, Colette. It wasn't an observation. It was a strategy. If he made me feel weak, I wouldn't fight. And if I did fight, he had already taken away my weapons. I put my head in my hands. I wanted to give up. It would be so easy to just let him win. To take whatever pittance of alimony he offered and disappear. But then I remembered the text. Wear that black lace thing. I remembered the coffee stain on my binder. I remembered the $47,000 from my retirement account. No, I wasn't fragile. I was just dormant. I couldn't get the records digitally. Barrett was too smart for that now, or at least his new high-priced accountants were. I needed a human error. I needed a crack in the armor. I thought about who had left the company recently. Barrett had a high turnover rate these days. He fired people for disloyalty, which usually meant they asked too many questions about the expense reports. Bernice Kowalski had been our office manager for 6 years. She was a tough woman in her 60s with a smoker's cough and a memory like a steel trap. Barrett had fired her 3 months ago. He told me she was getting too old and couldn't keep up with the new software. I found her address in an old physical address book I kept in the junk drawer. Barrett had never thought to burn that. I drove to her house. It was a small bungalow on the east side, with peeling paint and a yard full of ceramic garden gnomes. I knocked on the door. Bernice opened it holding a lit cigarette. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing through the smoke. "Well, if it isn't Mrs. Hollingsworth," she rasped. "Come to fire me again? I am not here on Barrett's behalf," I said. "I am here because I think he is stealing from me." Bernice stared at me for a long moment. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Get in here," she said. Her living room smelled of menthols and cats. We sat on a floral sofa covered in plastic. "I knew it would happen eventually," Bernice said, crushing her cigarette out in an overflowing ashtray. "He is a snake, Colette. A charm school snake, but a snake." "He locked me out of everything," I said. "The bank accounts, the cloud, everything. I need proof, Bernice. I know he is hiding money. I know he has shell companies." Bernice laughed, a dry hacking sound. "Shell companies? Honey, he has a whole shell beach, but you won't find that on the computer. He is paranoid. He thinks the IRS is reading his emails." "Then where is it?" I asked. Bernice leaned forward. "He keeps a ledger, a physical one. Red cover. He calls it his insurance policy. He writes down every bribe he pays to the inspectors, every cash kickback from the contractors, every dollar he skims off the top before it hits the official books. A physical ledger." It seemed archaic. "He doesn't trust the cloud," Bernice said. "He says the cloud has eyes. He keeps the red ledger with him or hidden somewhere, only he goes." "Do you know where?" Bernice hesitated. She looked at me, weighing whether I was tough enough to hear it. "He has a hunting cabin," she said, "up in the Cascades. He bought it last year through a company called Summit Holdings. He told everyone it was a rental, but I saw the deed before he snatched it off my desk. That is where he goes when he disappears for the weekend." "The cabin," I whispered. "If the book exists," Bernice said, "it is there." "But Colette?" "Yes? He has an alarm system, and he keeps a gun up there." I drove home with my mind racing. A cabin, a red ledger. It sounded like something out of a bad spy novel, but it made sense. Barrett was arrogant, but he was also a control freak. He wouldn't destroy the evidence of his genius. He would want to keep it, to admire it, to prove how smart he was. I had to go there. I sat at my kitchen table and mapped it out. The cabin was 3 hours away, deep in the mountains. I looked up the location on a map. It was isolated. No neighbors for miles. If I went, I would be breaking and entering. Technically, it was marital property if he bought it with our money, but since he had hidden the ownership, I wasn't on the title. If the police caught me, Barrett would press charges. He would love to see me in handcuffs. I imagined the headline, "Developer's Wife Arrested for Burglary." My stomach twisted. I was an accountant, for God's sake. I followed rules. I colored inside the lines. I didn't break into cabins. But what was the alternative? Wait for Warren to subpoena documents that Barrett had already shredded? Wait for the judge to award me a pittance based on false tax returns? I looked at the text message on my phone again. "Can't wait to see you tonight." He was probably with her right now, laughing at me. Spending my retirement money on her dinners. Anger is a useful fuel. It burns cleaner than despair. I decided I would go on Friday. Barrett had a golf tournament in the city. He would be occupied for at least 6 hours. It was a tight window, but it was the only one I had. I packed a bag, flashlight, crowbar. I had to buy one at a hardware store 3 towns over, paying cash, gloves, a camera. I felt like an imposter in my own body. I wasn't a hero. I was a terrified woman in a cardigan, but I was moving, and moving was better than waiting to die. Friday morning arrived with a gray drizzle that matched my mood. I told Barrett I was going to visit my mother for the day. He barely nodded, not looking up from his espresso. "Have fun," he said. I waited until he left in his Range Rover, then I got into my 7-year-old sedan. He had refused to let me trade it in last year, saying we needed to conserve cash for the business. Meanwhile, Ashlyn was driving a brand new Mercedes. I knew that now. Bernice had told me. I drove east, watching the city fade into suburbs, then into farmland, then into the dark green wall of the Cascade foothills. The road started to climb. The rain turned into a heavy mist. My car wasn't built for mountain roads. It struggled on the inclines, the engine whining in protest. About 2 hours in, halfway up a steep switchback, the temperature gauge on my dashboard spiked. "No, no, no," I pleaded aloud. "Not now." Steam started to curl out from under the hood. I pulled over onto the narrow gravel shoulder. The silence of the forest was immediate and oppressive. Giant fir trees loomed over me, dripping water. I popped the hood. A wave of white steam hit me in the face. The radiator hose had a hairline crack. It was hissing like a snake. I stood there on the side of the road, shivering in my raincoat. In the old days, I would have called Barrett. He would have come to get me. He would have fixed it. He would have been my hero. I reached for my phone, but stopped. I couldn't call him. I couldn't call Wei either. The charge would show up on the credit card statement, and he would ask why I was 200 miles away from my mother's house. I was alone. I looked at the engine. I knew the theory of how it worked, but I had never touched it. Barrett always said, "Don't touch the cars, Colette. You will break a nail." I opened the trunk. I had a gallon of water I kept for emergencies, another habit from my father. I found a roll of duct tape in the emergency kit. I waited 20 minutes for the engine to cool, pacing back and forth on the gravel, checking my watch every 30 seconds. I was losing time. When the steam stopped, I wrapped the duct tape around the hose. I wrapped it until it was a thick, silver bandage. It looked ugly. It looked amateur. But when I poured the water into the reservoir and started the engine, the hissing had stopped. I looked at my hands. They were covered in grease and grime. My nails were ruined. I wiped them on my jeans. I didn't care. I felt a surge of pride that was sharper and more real than anything I had felt in years. I fixed it. I didn't need him. I got back in the car and kept driving. The cabin was only 10 miles away. I parked my car a quarter of a mile down the logging road, tucking it behind a thick grove of hemlocks where the gray paint would blend into the shadows. I walked the rest of the way. The air up here was thinner, sharper, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. My boots crunched softly against the gravel, and every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The cabin sat in a clearing, a brooding structure of dark logs and stone. It looked masculine and imposing, exactly the kind of fortress Barrett would build to feel like a pioneer. I approached from the rear, circling wide to avoid the motion sensor lights Bernice had warned me about. The windows were dark. The place looked deserted, but my heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I felt sick. I tried the back door first, locked, obviously. I moved to the kitchen window. I peered inside, shielding my eyes with my hands. I could see the outline of stainless steel appliances and a butcher block island. Barrett insisted on gourmet kitchens even in the wilderness. I took the crowbar out of my bag. It was heavy, cold steel that felt alien in my grip. I had bought it with cash, avoiding eye contact with the cashier, feeling like a criminal. Now I was about to become one. I wrapped the head of the crowbar in a spare t-shirt I had brought. I didn't want a loud shatter. I wanted a muffled break. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Do it, Colette. Just do it." I swung the bar. The sound was a dull thud followed by the wet crunch of safety glass giving way. It wasn't the dramatic crash I expected. It was uglier, messier. Shards rained down onto the kitchen counter inside. I used the gloved tip of the bar to clear the jagged edges from the frame. I had to climb through. I hiked my leg over the sill, snagging my jeans on a piece of glass I had missed. I felt a sharp scratch on my thigh, but I ignored it. I pulled myself up and tumbled onto the granite counter, knocking over a spice rack. The little jars rolled across the stone with a deafening clatter. I froze. I lay there on the counter, listening. Silence returned, heavy and judging. I slid to the floor, my boots hitting the hardwood. I was inside. The cabin smelled of stale bourbon and cedar. I clicked on my flashlight, keeping the beam low to the ground. I didn't want to alert anyone who might be driving on the main road below. I moved to the main living area. It was decorated with leather furniture and animal heads mounted on the walls, Barrett's attempts at masculinity. I went straight for the desk in the corner. I rifled through the drawers. Nothing but old fishing licenses and maps. Bernice said he kept the ledger close. I checked the bookshelves. I pulled out books, shaking them to see if anything fell out. Nothing. I checked the freezer. I checked under the sofa cushions. I checked the toilet tank. I was tearing the place apart, my panic rising with every empty hiding spot. If I left here with nothing, the risk was for nothing. Then I saw it. In the corner of the master bedroom, bolt to the floor inside the walk-in closet, was a gun safe. It was massive, black steel with a digital keypad. I stared at the red light on the lock. I didn't know the code. I tried his birthday. Error. I tried our anniversary. Error. I tried Ashlyn's birthday, which I had memorized from her social media. Error. The safe beeped a warning. One more try and it would lock out. I sat back on my heels, fighting the urge to scream. It had to be in there. He would keep the incriminating evidence with his guns. It was poetic in a twisted way. I ran my hands over the cold metal of the safe, feeling for a keyhole, a weakness, anything. My fingers brushed against the bottom edge where the safe met the floor. There was a gap there, maybe half an inch of clearance for the bolts. I felt something, not metal, texture. I lay flat on my stomach, pressing my cheek against the rough carpet. I shined the flashlight into the narrow gap underneath the heavy steel box. There, taped to the underside of the safe with heavy-duty duct tape, was a book. I reached in. My fingers barely grazed it. I had to use the crowbar to scrape at the tape. It took me 3 agonizing minutes of scratching and prying before the tape gave way. I hooked the edge of the book and dragged it out. It was a small red moleskin notebook. The cover was worn, the corners bent. I opened it. The handwriting was Barrett's, distinctive, jagged scrawl. I read the first entry, March 4th, Inspector Davis, cash, $5,000. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just numbers, it was names. It was crimes. I was sitting on the floor of the closet, the red notebook open in my lap, when I heard it. The sound of tires crunching on gravel. It was faint at first, then louder. The distinct rumble of a heavy engine climbing the driveway. I scrambled up, clutching the book to my chest. I ran to the bedroom window and peeked through the blinds. Twin beams of headlights cut through the gloom. It was the Range Rover. Barrett was supposed to be at a golf tournament. He lied. Of course he lied. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. It was 4 in the afternoon. He must have skipped the back 9. I heard the car doors slam. I heard a woman's voice, high and complaining. My boots are going to get ruined in this mud, Barrett. You said it was paved. It is rustic, Ashlyn. That is the point. Stop whining. They were walking toward the front door. I was trapped. I couldn't go out the front. I couldn't go out the kitchen window I had broken because I would have to run right past them to get to my car. The front door lock beeped. He was typing in the code. I looked around the bedroom frantically. There was no other exit. The bathroom had a small window, but it was too high. The closet. It was my only option. I ran back into the walk-in closet and squeezed myself into the far corner, behind a rack of heavy winter coats. I pulled a long wool trench coat around me, burying myself in the fabric. I curled into a ball, holding the red ledger so tight my knuckles turned white. The front door opened. "Ugh, it smells musty in here," Ashlyn said. Her voice carried clearly through the thin walls. "I will open a window," Barrett said. "Do you want a drink?" "Vodka. And turn up the heat. I am freezing." I heard heavy footsteps on the hardwood. They were in the living room, that was 20 feet away. I stopped breathing. I concentrated on slowing my heart rate, terrified that the thumping in my chest would echo through the house. I heard the clink of glass, the sound of liquid being poured. "So, when are you going to tell her?" Ashlyn asked. "I will tell her when the papers are ready," Barrett said. His voice was dismissive, bored. "I don't want a scene until I have the assets secured." Colette gets emotional. "Emotional?" Ashlyn laughed. "She is pathetic. You said she barely leaves the house. She is useful for some things," Barrett said. "She keeps the house clean. But yeah, she is past her expiration date." I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. Past my expiration date, like I was a carton of milk. "Babe, what happened to the kitchen?" Ashlyn shouted. I froze. "What?" Barrett yelled back. "There is glass everywhere, and the window is open." My blood ran cold. They found the break-in. Barrett's footsteps pounded toward the kitchen. "What the hell? A bear?" Ashlyn suggested, her voice trembling. "Bears don't use crowbars," Barrett said. His voice was low, dangerous. "Someone broke in. I heard him moving. He was coming toward the bedroom, toward the safe, toward his gun. I had to move. Now." While they were shouting in the kitchen, I slipped out of the closet. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went to the bedroom window. I unlocked the latch. It stuck. Paint sealed it shut. I pushed up with all my strength. It gave way with a groan of wood against wood. "Did you hear that?" Barrett yelled from the kitchen. I scrambled out the window, tumbling headfirst into a wet rhododendron bush. The branches scratched my face, but I didn't feel it. I hit the mud and scrambled to my feet. "Run!" I sprinted toward the tree line. I didn't look back. I heard the back door of the cabin fly open. "Hey!" Barrett shouted. I didn't stop. I dove into the dense underbrush, thorns tearing at my jeans. I scrambled up the embankment, slipping in the mud, clawing my way toward the road where I parked. I was gasping for air, my lungs burning, but I clutched that red book like it was my own heart. I drove for an hour before I stopped shaking. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home. If Barrett knew someone had taken the ledger, he would come for me. But he didn't know it was me. He saw a shadow. He saw a broken window. He probably thought it was a local junkie looking for electronics. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. I paid cash. I sat on the lumpy bed under the flickering fluorescent light and opened the red ledger. I spent the next 6 hours translating Barrett's shorthand. It was worse than I thought. I found an entry for the Riverside project. Material costs listed at $200,000. But next to it, in parentheses, he had written, "Actual $50,000, pocket difference to Cayman account." He was inflating costs to lower his taxable income, then siphoning the difference offshore. I turned the page. September 12th. Zoning permit denied. Payment to Councilman Reed. $10,000 cash. Bribery. I turned another page. Summit Holdings. Purchase of cabin. $65,000. Source, skimmed labor fund. He was stealing from his own workers' wages to buy his love nest. I took photos of every page with my phone, backing them up to a new secret cloud account I had created at the library. Then I transcribed the data into a narrative format. I melted the lists into sentences. The entry for August 3rd detailed a payment of $12,000 to a shell company called North Star Logistics for services that were never rendered. The entry for October 1st showed a purchase of diamond earrings for $3,000, noted as equipment rental. I built a map of his corruption. It was vast, it was systemic, and it was all right here in my hands. I needed to verify the shell companies. The ledger was proof of intent, but I needed proof of existence. I waited until Monday morning. Barrett was still at the cabin, or dealing with the police about the break-in. I went to the county clerk's office. I walked up to the counter. The woman working there was named Dolores. She had been there for 20 years. She had thick glasses and a sweater with a cat on it. "Mrs. Hollingsworth," Dolores said, looking up from her computer. "I haven't seen you in ages. How is the business?" "It is booming, Dolores," I lied, forcing a smile. "Barrett is so busy I am trying to help organize some of the old files. I need to pull the registration documents for a few entities." "Of course, dear. What names?" "Summit Holdings, Riverside Properties Group, and North Star Logistics." Dolores typed slowly. Her keyboard clacked in the quiet room. "Here they are," she said. She printed the pages. I took them, my fingers brushing against the warm paper. I looked at the registered agent for Summit Holdings. It wasn't Barrett. It was a lawyer I didn't know. But the address was a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 towns over. And the signature on the incorporation documents. It was illegible, but I recognized the loop of the B. "Thank you, Dolores," I said. "You know," Dolores said, lowering her voice, "you look tired, Colette. Is everything okay?" I looked at her. I probably looked like hell. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I had scratches on my face covered with makeup. "I am just working hard," I said. "You know how it is." She nodded sympathetically. "Well, don't let him work you to death. You are too nice for that business." I walked out into the sunshine. I looked at the documents in my hand. Summit Holdings owned the cabin. Riverside Properties Group owned the apartment Ashlyn was living in. North Star Logistics held the offshore accounts. I had the map. I had the key. Now I just needed the executioner. I drove straight to the law offices of Warren Pierce. I didn't have an appointment. I didn't care. I walked past the receptionist, clutching the red book and the fresh folder of deeds. "I need to see Mr. Pierce," I said. "He is in a meeting," the receptionist said. "Tell him Colette Hollingsworth is here," I said. "And tell him I brought the smoking gun." Warren Pierce was not what I expected. I imagined a shark in a 3-piece suit, someone loud and aggressive. Instead, he was a quiet man in his 60s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a cardigan that looked like it had seen better days. He sat behind a desk piled high with files, looking at me over the top of his reading glasses. I placed the red ledger on the center of his blotter. It landed with a heavy, dull thud. "What is this?" Warren asked, his voice gravelly. "That is the reason my husband has been pleading poverty while buying luxury condos," I said. I sat down without being invited. My legs were still trembling from the drive, but my voice was steady. Warren opened the book. He flipped through the first few pages, his eyebrows rising steadily toward his hairline. He stopped on the page detailing the bribes to the zoning commission. He read the entry for the shell company transfers. "Mrs. Hollingsworth," he said slowly, "do you understand what you are holding here?" "Evidence," I said. "This is not just evidence for a divorce," he said. "This is a federal indictment bound in red leather. Where did you get this?" "I found it," I said. He looked up at me, his eyes sharp. "Be specific. Did you find it in your home? In a shared space?" "I found it in a cabin owned by a shell company, taped to the bottom of a safe I had to pry open after breaking a window with a crowbar." Warren closed his eyes for a moment. Then he took a deep breath and looked at me. "I am going to pretend I didn't hear the part about the crowbar," he said. "We will say you retrieved it from a property you believe to be marital assets. But we need to be very careful. If we use this, there is no going back. This is the nuclear option." I looked at the ledger. I thought about the text message. I thought about Ashlyn laughing in my kitchen. "Push the button," I said. Warren leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his chin. The air in the office felt charged, heavy with the weight of the decision I had just made. "If we file this in family court," Warren said, "it becomes public record. But before we do that, we have another move, a stronger move." "What?" I asked. "Have you ever heard of the IRS whistleblower office?" I shook my head. The government pays a reward to individuals who provide specific and credible information about tax fraud, he explained. If the amount in dispute exceeds $2 million, which judging by this ledger, it certainly does, the whistleblower is entitled to between 15 and 30% of the collected proceeds. 30%? I did the math in my head instantly. If Barrett had hidden $10 million, that was $3 million. But it is not about the money, Warren said, watching my face. It is about leverage. Once we file this claim, the IRS begins an investigation. Barrett will be fighting a war on two fronts. He will be fighting you for the divorce, and he will be fighting the federal government for his freedom. He paused. But you need to know something, Colette. Once we start this, he will come at you with everything he has. He will try to destroy you. He will cut off your funds. He will slander you. He will try to make you look insane. I thought about the years of erasure. I thought about being called fragile. I thought about the way he looked through me like I was a piece of furniture he had grown bored of. He already destroyed me, I said. He just doesn't know I survived yet. Warren smiled then. It was a small, grim smile. All right then, he said. Let's go to work. We spent the next 3 hours filling out Form 211. It was tedious, exacting work. We had to map every entry in the ledger to a specific violation of the tax code. I felt a strange sense of calm as I worked. This was accounting. This was my language. I wasn't the fragile wife anymore. I was the auditor. Here, I pointed to an entry. He lists a $50,000 payment to North Star Logistics for consultation. But North Star is just a P.O. box in a strip mall. I have the deed here. Warren typed it into the affidavit. And here, I continued, the renovation costs for the Riverside project. He claims $300,000 in materials. The ledger shows actual costs were $80,000. The rest was pocketed. We built the case brick by brick. It was a fortress of facts. By the time we finished, the sun was setting outside Warren's window, casting long orange shadows across the room. We printed the package. It was thick, maybe 50 pages. I signed the bottom line. My signature looked different to me, sharper, angrier. I will overnight this to the IRS whistleblower office in Ogden, Utah, Warren said, sealing the envelope. Now we need to talk about the divorce filing. I want to serve him myself, I said. Warren frowned. Usually we use a process server. It is safer. I need to see his face, I said. I need him to know it was me. Warren looked at me for a long moment, assessing me. Fine, he said, but take a witness and do it in a public place. Do not do it at home. I nodded. I knew exactly where I was going to do it. I drove home in the dark. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I had to go back to the house. I had to sleep in the bed next to him. I had to pretend for a few more days until the paperwork was ready. When I pulled into the driveway, the lights were on. Barrett's Range Rover was parked in the garage. I walked into the kitchen. Barrett was standing by the island, pouring a glass of wine. He looked up when I entered. There you are, he said. His voice was light, casual. You were at your mother's all day? Yes, I lied. She wasn't feeling well. He nodded, taking a sip of the red wine. That is nice of you. You are always so dutiful. He walked over and kissed me on the cheek. I had to force myself not to flinch. I smelled the faint scent of Ashland's perfume on his collar, mixed with the wood smoke from the cabin. You will never guess what happened to me this weekend, he said, leaning against the counter. What? I asked, putting my purse down. Some junkie broke into the rental property up north, he said. Smashed a window. Made a mess. My heart hammered against my ribs. Oh no. Did they take anything? Nothing of value, he said, waving his hand. Just rummaged around. Probably looking for prescription drugs or electronics. It is just annoying. Now I have to deal with the insurance. He looked at me closely, his eyes narrowing slightly. You look exhausted, babe. You have scratches on your face." I froze. I had forgotten about the rhododendron bush. I was gardening at Mom's," I stammered. "Rose bushes." Barrett laughed, a soft, condescending chuckle. "Of course you were." "You really shouldn't exert yourself like that, Colette. You know how you get, all worn out." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers felt cold. "Why don't you go take a bath?" he suggested. "I ordered takeout. I will handle dinner. You just rest." I nodded, unable to speak. I walked up the stairs, feeling his eyes on my back. He didn't suspect me. He thought I was too weak, too stupid to pull off a heist. He thought I was gardening. The contempt in his voice was a physical weight. But as I turned the corner, I smiled. Let him think I was weak. It would make the fall that much harder. 3 days later, I walked into the lobby of the Hollingsworth Development Building. I was wearing my best navy suit. I had my hair pulled back. I wasn't carrying a purse. I was carrying a manila envelope. The receptionist, a new girl named Jessica who looked terrified of her own shadow, looked up. "Mrs. Hollingsworth?" she squeaked. Is Mr. Hollingsworth expecting you?" "No," I said calmly, "but I need to see him. It is urgent family business." She picked up the phone, her hand shaking. I didn't wait. I walked past her desk and down the hallway. I knew the way. I had helped design this office layout 10 years ago. I walked past the conference room. I saw heads turn. I saw the whispers start. The fragile wife was here. The ghost was walking the halls. Barrett's office was at the end of the corridor. The door was open. I stepped into the doorway. Barrett was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, and sitting on the edge of the desk, swinging her legs, was Ashlyn. They were laughing. Ashlyn was holding a fabric swatch, showing it to him. "I think the velvet is better for the penthouse," she was saying. Barrett looked up. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of annoyance. "Colette, what are you doing here?" Ashlyn slid off the desk, smoothing her skirt. She looked at me with that same cat-like amusement she had in the courtroom. "Hi, Colette," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We were just discussing some design choices." I ignored her. I walked straight to the desk and placed the envelope in front of Barrett. "I am serving you with divorce papers," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to get louder. Barrett stared at the envelope. Then he looked at me. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "Colette?" he sighed. "Really? Here? In front of my staff?" "Open it," I said. He picked up the envelope and tore the tab. He pulled out the petition. He scanned the first page. "Irreconcilable differences," he read. "Division of assets." He dropped the papers back onto the desk and looked at me with a pitying expression. "Honey," he said softly, "are you sure you want to do this? You know how complicated these things get. You get confused by the simplest paperwork. Do you really want to drag yourself through a legal battle?" "I am not confused, Barrett," I said, "and I am not doing this alone." Ashlyn laughed then. "Oh, let her have her tantrum, Barrett. She is just acting out because she knows she lost you." I turned to Ashlyn. "You might want to read page 4, I said. "You are named as a co-respondent." Her smile faltered. Barrett stood up. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. He was tall, 6'2", and he used his height to intimidate. He stood too close, invading my personal space. "This is a mistake, Colette," he said, his voice low and reasonable. "A very big, very expensive mistake." "It is not a mistake," I said, holding my ground. "I want half, Barrett. Half of everything. The company, the properties, the accounts." He laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. "Half?" he repeated. "You think you deserve half? You haven't worked in a decade. You sit at home and spend my money while I build this empire. You are a dependent, Colette, a liability." "I built this with you," I said. "My money started it." "That was a loan," he said dismissively. a tiny little loan that I paid back 1,000 times over in jewelry and cars, and a life you could never afford on your own. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to withdraw this petition. You are going to go home, and we are going to forget this little outburst happened. Because if you don't, he paused, letting the threat hang in the air. If I don't, I challenged. If you don't, I will cut you off, he said. I will freeze the accounts. I will cancel the credit cards. I will make sure you don't have a dime to buy groceries, let alone pay a lawyer. You will be on the street, Colette, and you know you can't survive out there. You are too weak. He smiled, a toxic, benevolent smile. I am trying to protect you from yourself, babe. Don't make me be the bad guy. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved. I saw the monster clearly now. Do your worst, Barrett, I said. I turned and walked out. I held my head high. But as I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the bank. Alert. Your debit card ending in 4492 has been declined. He hadn't waited. He had done it while I was standing in front of him. He had pressed a button on his phone and erased my access to the world. I walked out to my car. I had a quarter tank of gas, I had no cash, and I had a war to fight. The next 3 months were a lesson in humiliation. Barrett didn't just cut me off, he laid siege to my life. The day after the confrontation, I stood in line at the pharmacy. I needed a refill on my migraine medication because my head had been throbbing for 48 hours straight. The pharmacist rang it up. That will be $42, she said. I swiped the one credit card I thought might still work, an old emergency card we kept in the kitchen drawer. Declined, the machine beeped. I felt the heat rise up my neck, a hot flush of shame that made my skin prickle. The line behind me was 3 people deep. A man in a construction vest sighed loudly, shifting his weight. I am sorry, I whispered. Let me try another. I tried the debit card again, just in case. Declined. Barrett had been thorough. He had flagged every joint account for fraud, freezing them solid. He had canceled the authorized user cards. He had stripped me down to 0. I looked at the pharmacist. She was young, impatient. Do you have cash? She asked. I opened my wallet. I had a $5 bill and some loose change. I looked at the little orange bottle on the counter. It held the only relief I would get from the pain that was splitting my skull open. No, I said, my voice barely audible. I guess I don't need it today. I walked out of the store, the bell on the door jingling cheerfully. I sat in my car and cried for 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face, drove to a pawn shop on 4th Street, and sold the diamond earrings Barrett had given me for our 10th anniversary. The pawnbroker gave me $200. It was a fraction of what they were worth, but it bought me groceries and aspirin. It felt like dirty money. But as I swallowed the pills dry, I realized that survival isn't about dignity. It is about endurance. I came home 2 weeks later to find my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I jiggled it, thinking it was stuck. It wasn't stuck. The mechanism was new, shining brass that mocked me. I pounded on the door. Barrett! The door didn't open. Instead, my phone buzzed. It was an email from his lawyer to mine, which Warren forwarded to me instantly. Mrs. Hollingsworth is hereby notified that the marital residence is now a secure asset due to her erratic behavior and the attempted theft of company property. She is permitted to retrieve personal effects under supervision, erratic behavior, attempted theft. He was spinning the narrative. He was turning the victim into the villain. I slept in my car that night. It was parked 2 streets away under a broken street lamp. It was cold and the back seat was cramped. I curled up under a spare blanket I kept in the trunk, listening to the sounds of the night, every creak and snap making me jump. The next day, Warren arranged for me to stay at a cheap motel on the edge of town while we petitioned for temporary support. The room smelled of stale smoke and lemon cleaner. The carpet was sticky. I sat on the bed, looking at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a grimacing face. This was what Barrett wanted. He wanted to break me. He wanted me to call him, sobbing, begging to come home, agreeing to whatever scraps he offered. I pulled out the copy of the IRS whistleblower form I kept in my bag. I smoothed the paper. "Not yet, Barrett," I whispered to the empty room. "You think you have me cornered, but you are the one standing on a trap door." The morning of the trial, the hallway outside the courtroom was crowded. I wore the same navy suit I had served him in. I had cleaned it in the motel sink and ironed it on the floor. I looked professional. I looked composed. Inside, I was vibrating with a frequency that felt like it could shatter glass. Barrett arrived with an entourage. He had 3 lawyers now. He looked rested, tanned, successful. He walked like a king returning to his court. And right beside him was Ashlyn. She wore a white dress that was aggressively bridal. She held his arm with both hands. When they saw me standing with Warren, they stopped. Barrett looked me up and down. He took in the slightly worn shoes, the lack of jewelry. He smirked. "You look tired, Colette," he said. "This whole thing has really taken a toll on you. Maybe we should just settle today. I am still willing to be generous." "Generous," I repeated. "Like changing the locks? Like canceling my medicine?" "I am protecting the assets," he said smoothly, from someone who is clearly unstable. He stepped closer. His cologne filled my nose, a scent that used to mean safety and now smelled like rot. "You are going to lose, Colette, and when you do, you will have nothing. No house, no money, no friends, just your pride, and pride doesn't pay the rent." I felt Warren's hand on my elbow, a silent warning to stay calm. Then Ashlyn leaned forward. She looked at me with wide, mock-sympathetic eyes. "He is right, honey," she said. "You should just take the deal. It is embarrassing to watch you try so hard." Honey. That word again. I looked at her. I looked at the expensive dress bought with stolen money. I looked at the man who had built a life on lies. "See you inside," I said. The trial began. Judge Chen sat high on the bench, her face unreadable. Barrett's lead attorney, a man named Thornton who charged $600 an hour, spent the morning painting a picture of a delusional, vindictive wife. He called Barrett to the stand. "Mr. Hollingsworth," Thornton asked, "did your wife contribute financially to the founding of Hollingsworth Development?" Barrett adjusted his tie. He looked at the judge, projecting sincerity. "No," he said. "I built the company from the ground up. I worked 18-hour days. Colette, she was home. She handled some household bills, but she never understood the business. She found the numbers confusing." "And the initial capital?" Thornton asked. "My own savings," Barrett lied, "and a small loan from my father, which I repaid." I watched him. He lied so easily. It flowed out of him like water. He didn't even blink. He had told the lie so many times he believed it. Thornton sat down, looking satisfied. Warren stood up. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like a tired librarian. He walked to the podium carrying the red ledger. He hadn't entered it into evidence yet. It was just sitting there, a small, battered notebook. "Mr. Hollingsworth," Warren said, "you testified that you have disclosed all financial assets to this court. Is that correct?" "Absolutely," Barrett said. "And you have no other sources of income? No other properties?" "None." Warren paused. He picked up the red book. He held it up. "Do you recognize this, Mr. Hollingsworth?" Barrett squinted. For a second, he looked confused. Then recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face went slack. The color drained out of his skin so fast he looked like a corpse. I don't know what that is," he stammered. "You don't?" Warren asked, feigning surprise. "That is strange." "Because it was found taped to the bottom of a gun safe in a cabin owned by Summit Holdings, a cabin you visited 3 days ago." "Objection!" Thornton shouted, jumping up. "This is ambush!" "Overruled," Judge Chen said. She was leaning forward, staring at the red book. "Continue, Mr. Pierce." Warren opened the ledger. This book contains handwritten entries detailing cash payments to building inspectors, Warren read. It details the creation of 3 shell companies: Summit Holdings, Riverside Properties, North Star Logistics. Barrett was gripping the railing of the witness stand. His knuckles were white. "This is a fabrication," Barrett choked out. "She forged it." "She is crazy. Is she?" Warren asked. He pulled a document from his folder. "Because we cross-reference the entries in this book with public records. Every bribe corresponds to a permit approval date. Every transfer corresponds to a withdrawal from your corporate accounts." Warren walked to the judge's bench. "But that is not all, Your Honor." He handed a thick packet to the bailiff. 3 months ago, my client filed a whistleblower complaint with the Internal Revenue Service regarding the tax fraud detailed in this ledger. The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens after a car crash. "The IRS has accepted the claim," Warren said, his voice ringing in the quiet room. "They have opened a formal criminal investigation into Mr. Hollingsworth and Hollingsworth Development. This letter confirms that the federal government is currently freezing all assets associated with the defendant pending an audit." Judge Chen took the papers. She read them. Then she looked at Barrett. Her expression wasn't neutral anymore. It was cold fury. "Mr. Hollingsworth," she said, "you stood in my court and lied under oath. You hid millions of dollars in marital assets, and you are currently under federal investigation for defrauding the United States government." Barrett tried to speak. No sound came out. He looked at Ashlyn in the gallery. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the door, calculating her exit. Checkmate, I thought. The ruling was a massacre. Judge Chen didn't just divide the assets, she obliterated Barrett's control. Given the defendant's egregious fraud and attempt to conceal marital property, the judge said, her voice cutting through the air, "I am awarding the plaintiff, Mrs. Hollingsworth, 100% of the marital home." Barrett made a choking sound. "I am awarding Mrs. Hollingsworth 70% of the remaining liquid assets once the IRS liens are satisfied. Furthermore, I am piercing the corporate veil of the shell companies. The cabin, the apartment at the Meridian, and the vehicles are to be liquidated." She turned to Ashlyn. "And any assets transferred to Miss Sinclair in the last 12 months are hereby voided as fraudulent conveyance. They will be returned to the estate immediately." Ashlyn stood up and stormed out of the courtroom, her heels clicking like angry gunshots. Barrett just sat there, slumped over, a man whose empire had turned to dust in an afternoon. When we walked out of the courthouse, the sun was blinding. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. Warren turned to me. "You did good, Colette." I looked at him. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt light. The weight I had been carrying for 15 years was gone. "What happens to him now?" I asked. Warren adjusted his glasses. "Well, the IRS agents are waiting for him at the back exit. He's going to have a very long afternoon." I nodded. I walked to my car. I got in. I turned the key. It started on the first try. I drove away. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I didn't look back at the life I had lost. I looked at the road ahead. It was open. It was mine. Update. 3 months later. The check from the IRS hasn't arrived yet. Government bureaucracy takes time. But the divorce settlement hit my account last week. It was $4 million. Barrett is currently out on bail, awaiting trial for tax evasion and fraud. He texts me sometimes, long, rambling messages about how we were a good team, about how he misses me, about how Ashlyn was a mistake. I blocked his number yesterday. I bought a small house with a garden. I planted roses, real ones this time. I also started a consulting firm. I help women understand their family finances. I teach them how to find the hidden accounts, how to read the tax returns, how to spot the red flags before it is too late. I call the business The Ledger. Bernice works for me. She runs the front desk and yells at anyone who wastes my time. Last Tuesday, I was at a coffee shop and a man spilled his latte near my table. He started apologizing profusely, grabbing napkins, making a scene. He was charming. He had a nice smile. I looked at the mess. I looked at him. "It is fine," I said. I didn't help him clean it up. I picked up my book, drank my coffee, and walked away. I am done cleaning up other people's messes. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.